June 26, 1976, 12:17 a.m. Tokyo's new Latin Quarter nightclub. The kind of place where the champagne flows like water, where the music pulses until dawn, and where the city's elite come to forget themselves in neon and shadow. Muhammad Ali had just endured the most humiliating 15 rounds of his life. 7 hours earlier, in the Nippon Budokan Hall, in front of a worldwide audience, the greatest of all time had been reduced to a spectacle. Antonio Inoki, the wrestler, had spent nearly the entire fight lying on his back, kicking at Ali's legs like some bizarre human crab. 15 rounds of this circus. 15 rounds of the crowd booing, of Ali's corner screaming at him to do something, of Inoki's relentless kicks tearing into his shins and thighs. The fight had ended in a draw. A draw. Muhammad Ali, 3-time heavyweight champion, the man who'd beaten Sonny Liston, George Foreman, Joe Frazier, had fought a wrestler to a draw in a match that made a mockery of everything he'd built. The doctors had wanted to hospitalize him immediately. Ali had refused. So he'd come to New Latin Quarter, not to celebrate, not to drink, but because the alternative, sitting alone in a hotel room with his thoughts and his pain, was worse. The VIP section was packed with celebrities, American servicemen on leave, and the kind of people who thrived in Tokyo's after-hours world. In one corner, Jackie Chan sat with his stunt team, the men he called his brothers. They'd just wrapped a grueling week of filming, and this was supposed to be a night of well-earned rest. Ken Lo, Jackie's closest friend and fight choreographer, was in the middle of an animated story, his hands gesturing wildly, his voice carrying above the disco beat that pounded through the speakers. Nobody noticed when Ali's entourage entered first. 3 men in sharp suits, moving with the careful awareness of people whose job was to prevent problems. Behind them, Muhammad Ali himself, 6 feet 3 inches tall, 215 pounds, moving with a limp he was trying desperately to hide. His face was tight with pain, and something darker, a fury that had been building since that first ridiculous kick in the Budokan. He'd been the butt of the joke tonight. Him. The man who'd stood up to the U.S. government, who'd beaten the unbeatable, who'd declared himself the greatest and made the world believe it. Reduced to a sideshow, a carnival act. The whole world had watched him shuffle around that ring like a wounded animal, while Inoki played human tripwire. Ken Lo stood up to grab another drink from the service table. He didn't see Ali's associate until the man's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist with unexpected force. "Watch where you're going," the man said in English, his voice cold. Ken stumbled backward, more from surprise than the push, knocking over a champagne bucket. Ice and water spread across the floor. The music didn't stop, but conversation did. Jackie Chan was on his feet, instantly, his body moving before his mind fully processed what was happening. "Hey, easy," he called out in English, stepping between Ken and the associate, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "No problem here, just an accident." That's when Ali heard his voice. The champion's head turned, his eyes finding Jackie through the crowd, the movie star, the kung fu hero, the man who made fighting look like ballet, who turned violence into entertainment, who made millions playing at what Ali did for real. Muhammad Ali had just spent 15 rounds being made into entertainment, and he was done being anyone's show. He didn't walk toward Jackie. He moved with purpose, each step deliberate, despite the pain shooting up his legs. The crowd parted instinctively, sensing the shift in atmosphere from festive to something primal. Jackie's stunt team stood immediately, but Jackie raised his hand, stopping them. He'd been in real fights before, street brawls in Hong Kong as a teenager, brutal accidents on film sets where broken bones were occupational hazards. But he'd never seen anything like what he saw in Muhammad Ali's eyes that night. There was rage there, pure, focused rage. Not the wild anger of a drunk, but the controlled fury of a man who'd been humiliated and needed to restore something fundamental about himself. "Ali, please. We don't want any trouble," Jackie started, his voice calm, diplomatic, the voice he used in press conferences and international interviews. Ali grabbed him by the shirt with both hands and threw him backward. Jackie's body crashed through the glass coffee table in the center of the VIP section. The sound was catastrophic. Crystal exploded into countless shards. The music cut out instantly, the DJ frozen in shock. For 3 full seconds, the entire club held its breath. Jackie felt the impact in his ribs first, then his shoulders, then the back of his head as it bounced off the leather couch behind the destroyed table. His vision blurred. Blood began trickling from a dozen small cuts on his arms and neck. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard his team shouting, heard women screaming, heard footsteps approaching with terrible inevitability. He rolled to his left just as Ali's foot came down where his head had been, the champion's shoe crushing glass into powder. Even with his injured legs, Ali moved with frightening intent. This was real. This wasn't choreographed. There was no second take. Jackie scrambled to his feet, glass falling from his clothes like rain. His team surged forward, but Ali's people formed a wall, and suddenly fists were flying on the periphery, other fights breaking out like brush fires. But in the eye of the storm, it was just the two of them. Ali moved forward, limping but relentless. Not a boxer's stance, no bouncing, no rope-a-dope, just raw forward aggression. His right hand cocked back, that legendary right cross that had put down Sonny Liston, that had ended Cleveland Williams, that had carried him through 3 decades of combat. Jackie saw it coming, saw the shoulder dip, saw the hips rotate, saw the fist launch through the air with the force of a sledgehammer. In that fraction of a second, his entire martial arts training, every reflex honed through 10,000 falls and 1,000,000 rehearsals, compressed into a single decision. He dropped. Not a duck, not a slip. A complete, total surrender to gravity. Ali's fist whistled past Jackie's ear, missing by perhaps 2 centimeters, and slammed into the leather armchair behind him. The sound was like a gunshot. The champion's knuckles punched through the leather, through the padding, into the wooden frame beneath, which splintered on impact. For a microsecond, Ali's arm was embedded in the chair. Jackie used that microsecond. He rolled forward, between Ali's legs, coming up behind him. But before he could create distance, Ali spun with impossible speed for a man with injured legs and caught Jackie in a clinch, his arms locking around Jackie's upper body like a vice. The breath left Jackie's lungs instantly. He felt his ribs compress, felt his spine being squeezed. Ali was breathing hard against his ear, hot breath that carried the scent of mentholated muscle cream and something darker, pure unfiltered rage. Jackie tried to slip out, tried the 100 different escapes he knew, but this wasn't a wrist lock or a hold meant for grappling. This was a man trying to crush him. Panic hit him. Real panic. Not movie panic, where you know the director will yell cut. The kind of panic where you realize you might actually die in a nightclub in Tokyo at midnight for absolutely no reason at all. His hands clawed at Ali's forearms, but it was like trying to bend steel cables. His feet kicked backward, connecting with Ali's damaged shins, and for the first time Ali grunted in pain. The grip loosened fractionally. Jackie's vision started to darken at the edges. Hypoxia, oxygen deprivation, 30 seconds until unconsciousness, 60 until brain damage. He did the only thing he could do. He drove his elbow backward into Ali's ribs, not a movie strike but a real one, targeting the floating ribs with precision. The impact sent pain shooting through Jackie's own arm, but Ali's grip loosened for just a moment. Jackie twisted violently, getting one arm free, and drove his thumb into the pressure point below Ali's ear, a technique he'd learned from a Wing Chun master in Hong Kong decades ago. Ali released him, stumbling backward, his hand going to his neck. His injured legs nearly gave out, but he caught himself on a side table. But he didn't go down. He didn't even look hurt. He looked offended. "You think you can fight?" Ali's voice was rough, dangerous. "You think those movie tricks mean something?" Jackie backed away, his hands up, his body moving into a defensive stance that was pure instinct. His team was still fighting Ali's people. The club's security was trying to push through the crowd, and somewhere in the chaos, Jackie heard shouting in Japanese management, probably calling for help. But Ali didn't care. He grabbed an unopened bottle of champagne from an ice bucket, the bottle still dripping with condensation. He hefted it like a club. his intention crystal clear. "Ali, please," Jackie said. And he hated how his voice shook. "This isn't you. You're the greatest. You don't need to do this. The greatest." Ali's laugh was bitter, broken. "You see what they did to me tonight? Made me look like a fool. Made me dance around while that wrestler played games with me. 15 rounds of that garbage. The whole world watching, laughing." He threw the bottle. Jackie twisted, and the bottle exploded against the wall behind him. Champagne and glass erupting in a shower of foam and crystal, the smell of expensive alcohol, mixed with blood and sweat and fear. That's when Jackie saw it. Leaning against the overturned couch, half hidden in the wreckage of the coffee table, a broken chair leg. Solid wood, about 18 inches long, jagged at one end. A weapon. He grabbed it without thinking, holding it in a reverse grip, the way he'd held 100 prop weapons in 100 fight scenes. But this wasn't a prop, and if he used it, someone was going to the hospital. Ali saw the weapon, and his expression changed. Not fear. Something like recognition. "There we go," he said quietly. "Now you showing me something real." He advanced again, but slower this time, more measured. Despite the pain in his legs, despite the fury, the boxer in him was emerging. He was reading Jackie's stance, looking for openings, calculating angles. This was what he'd been born to do. This was the only language he spoke fluently. Jackie held his ground, but his mind was racing. He couldn't beat Muhammad Ali in a fight. Nobody could. Ali had survived Joe Frazier's left hook, George Foreman's power, Ken Norton's determination. In a real fight, in close quarters. Jackie would be unconscious in 30 seconds. The two men circled each other, and for a moment, the entire club seemed to freeze in place, everyone watching this surreal confrontation between two legends from completely different worlds. "You know what the difference is between you and me?" Ali said, his voice almost conversational now, which somehow made it more terrifying. "You get paid millions to pretend to fight. I got paid to actually hurt people. And you know what? I was the best at it. The greatest. Until tonight. Until they made me into a joke." "You're still the greatest," Jackie replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "One match doesn't change that. Nothing changes that." "Don't you patronize me," Ali exploded, the rage returning instantly. "You think you understand? You make your little movies, do your little stunts, everyone claps. I put my life on the line every time I step in that ring, and tonight they made me look like a fool." He charged. The soul stroft to her. "Pausen always cold stroft, type zum Auskom." Almost cold, not a boxer's calculated attack, a desperate rush, trying to close the distance where his hands would be devastating. Arms wide, trying to grab Jackie and drag him down where his weight and strength would be overwhelming. Jackie sidestepped at the last possible moment, using Ali's momentum against him, and the champion crashed into the wall behind him with a sound like thunder. Plaster cracked. A framed photograph fell and shattered. But Ali bounced off the wall and spun around, barely slowed despite the obvious pain in his legs, and grabbed Jackie by the shirt again. This time, Jackie didn't try to escape. He did something Ali didn't expect. He stopped fighting. He looked Ali directly in the eyes and said, very quietly, "I'm sorry about what happened tonight. I really am. It wasn't fair to you." For just a moment, something changed in Ali's face. The rage flickered. Behind it, Jackie saw something worse than anger. He saw pain. He saw humiliation. He saw a man who'd spent his entire life building a legacy, only to watch it be mocked in front of the entire world. Ali's grip loosened slightly. His eyes became unfocused. "I trained for months," he whispered. "I took it seriously. And that coward spent the whole fight on his back, kicking me like I was nothing, like I was a joke." The sound of heavy footsteps from across the room broke the moment. Two things happened simultaneously. First, the club's main doors burst open, and a dozen men in expensive suits entered. Not bouncers, not police, something else. Their faces were hard, their movements precise and professional. Yakuza, the real owners of this establishment, the ones who operated in the shadows, the ones who didn't like this kind of attention. Second, Both Jackie's stunt team and Ali's entourage finally broke through to their respective fighters, creating a human wall between them. The yakuza enforcer, who appeared to be in charge, a man in his 50s, with cold, calculating eyes, surveyed the destroyed VIP section with the expression of someone who'd seen worse but didn't appreciate the mess. Then he said something in rapid Japanese to his men. 6 of them immediately surrounded Ali. 6 more surrounded Jackie, not threatening, not aggressive, but unmistakably clear in their purpose. This fight was over. The lead enforcer looked at Ali and spoke in perfect English. "Mr. Ali, we have the utmost respect for you as a champion, but this establishment has certain rules. We would be honored if you would allow us to escort you to your hotel. Your bill tonight has been taken care of, and we have a doctor waiting who specializes in treating the kind of injuries you sustained tonight." It wasn't a suggestion. Ali looked at the man, then at Jackie, then at his own hands, which were bleeding from where he'd punched through the chair. The rage was draining out of him now, replaced by exhaustion and pain and the cold reality of what had almost happened. He looked down at his legs, at the purple bruises visible even through his pants, at the evidence of his humiliation made physical. When he looked back up at Jackie, his eyes were different, still angry, but no longer blind with it. "Yeah," he muttered. "Yeah, okay." As Ali's people guided him toward the exit, favoring his injured legs, he stopped and looked back at Jackie one last time. Their eyes met across the destroyed room. No words were exchanged, but Jackie nodded slightly, a gesture of respect, and after a long moment, Ali nodded back. Then he was gone, disappearing into the Tokyo night with his entourage, leaving behind a scene of destruction that would be cleaned up and covered up and never spoken about again. Jackie stood there, still holding the broken chair leg, his clothes torn and bloody, his body aching from impacts he'd feel for weeks. Ken Lo rushed over, checking him for injuries, asking if he was okay in rapid Cantonese. The other stunt team members were gathering the pieces of their scattered belongings, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The yakuza enforcer approached Jackie and bowed slightly. "Chon-san, we apologize for this incident. Your group's expenses are also covered. We hope this unpleasantness will remain private." Jackie understood immediately. This never happened. This would never be in the news. No police report, no witnesses willing to talk. Just another secret buried in Tokyo's endless night. "Of course," Jackie said quietly. "Thank you." Bo. As they left the club, the Tokyo summer night was warm and humid, the city still alive with lights and sound, despite the late hour. Jackie's hands were shaking, not from fear, he realized, but from adrenaline, finally leaving his system. Ken Lo walked beside him in silence for a while, then finally asked, "Jackie, what would you have done if he'd actually—" "I don't know," Jackie admitted. "I really don't know." They never spoke about that night again. Not to each other, not to reporters, not to friends. It became one of those stories that existed only in whispers and rumors, the kind of legend that people told but never truly believed. But sometimes late at night, when Jackie was alone, he thought about that moment when he'd looked into Muhammad Ali's eyes and seen not a monster, but a man in pain, a man who'd been humiliated, who'd had his legacy mocked, who'd lashed out because he didn't know what else to do. He thought about how close they'd both come to a tragedy that would have destroyed both their lives. He thought about the thickness of the line between legend and cautionary tale, and how easily it could be crossed. Two men at the peak of their powers, trapped in a moment that could have ended everything. One searching for a way to prove he was still the greatest, the other searching for a way to survive without sacrificing his principles. In the end, they both walked away. Broken glass, spilled champagne, blood on expensive leather. But they walked away, and maybe Jackie thought years later, maybe that was its own kind of victory. The question that haunted him though, the one he never answered, not even to himself. What would have happened if those yakuza enforcers had arrived 30 seconds later? What would have been left to walk away from then?